Oh, good evening, everybody, and welcome to another stream. Looking to change things up a little bit tonight with Wild West Wednesdays, where we're going to take a different approach, step away from TFT for the night, and look to play something different. Tonight's game, Legends of Runeterra, a card game based on the League of Legends universe, and it's very exciting because a new patch just came out today. So let's get right into it. The biggest changes that have happened with the new expansion are the addition of 3 new cards, or 3 new champions, should I say. Zilean, Irelia, and Malphite. Let's take a step back just to understand what exactly is LoR, and what are we going to be doing with this game. So LoR is a card game. It's a collectible card game made by Riot, using characters from the League of Legends universe. So if you don't know the League of Legends universe, unfortunately I won't be able to dive into every single character, but when I do make a deck with a character, I'll try to give a little bit of a backstory, maybe a little bit of a role that they play in the game, and what they are meant to be from a lore perspective. But for Legends of Runeterra, the whole purpose of this game is a turn-based card game where you play cards and the enemy has a chance to respond, and that makes sort of a back and forth handshake for you to try to outplay your opponent and make sure that you can get in as much damage as you need to win the game. In order to win the game, you can either set the opponent's Nexus health to 0, or you can make sure they run out of cards in their deck, and then when they try to draw a new card, there's no cards left, so they lose the game. As far as it goes for the new cards with this expansion, I will jump and filter right to Empires the Ascended just to give you an idea. New champions that were added today, I know they're a little bit grayscale, that's just because they're unowned, is Malphite, is Irelia, and Zilean. So one of the most exciting cards to me being added is Irelia, because I'm sure it's going to be a very strong unit, just based on the effect. As we look towards the different cards that we can use Irelia with, because her level up condition is 12 allies attacking, it's good to know that she'll be strong with anything like Azir, who just wants units summoned, so you summon the unit, you attack with the unit. Could be anyone like LeBlanc. You've attacked, you hit for damage. Could be someone like a Sivir. You've dealt a certain amount of damage. You can have that from just having units attacking. So that's just the new Empires the Ascended cards. There's so many other ones that Irelia can be used with. When I say what a level up condition means, is that champions have a basic form and a basic art, and once they level up, they change, usually gaining +1 attack and +1 health in their stats, and a new effect. This new effect, for example, for Irelia, makes her very durable, makes her able to swap into and out of combat to keep herself safe, and makes it so that she can consistently bring out new units to cause attacks and slowly chip away at the opponent's health. So Irelia is looking really exciting, but I already know just from seeing some streamers, seeing some other pros, that Irelia is going to be used usually with Azir in a very swarm heavy deck. When I say the word swarm, what I refer to is they're going to just try to get as many units on the board, constantly try to rush and attack you and chip down your health and just wear you down to the point that you won't be able to come back from it. So what do I want to do as a deck that I think will be fun and could be very effective into this Irelia that I'm sure many people will be playing as it's day 1 of the expansion? Well, one of the most exciting things that I can think of is bombs. So Zilean is a 2-mana 1/4, so a When I say 2 mana, 1/4, I refer to the cost, followed by the attack and health power. That'll be the same description for any sort of a unit versus any sort of a champion. His level up condition is you need to use time bombs, which he will be creating in the deck. These time bombs are a unit you place on the board. They can't attack, block, or take damage, but they take up a space, allowing you to have one less unit. And these time bombs are very interesting in that when they're summoned, you draw a card. So they're able to refill your hand so they don't make you fall behind on what's called tempo. A tempo, similar to when you have a musical tempo, is the pace of the game. You want to make sure that your pace of the game is not too slow, or else very aggressive enemies with a very fast game plan can get online very quickly and be able to defeat you before you're able to do anything that you want to. Conversely, if you're playing a deck that's more focused on controlling the board, controlling the opponent's cards, and making sure that you can have time to make your game plan a reality while shutting down the opponent's game plan with very reactive cards, that's usually considered a control deck. And I think Zilean falls somewhere in the middle. And those types of decks in between a very aggressive deck and a very controlling deck are what we would call a mid-range. The other type of deck that you would have in the middle would be combo style deck, where you want to use a specific set of cards in a very specific way. And in order to get those combination of cards, you want to make sure that you can have as much of the combo ready as soon as possible. So you're going to want to focus on card draw, potentially ways to have those cards in your hand already, or to do what's called tutoring those cards. When you say that you're going to tutor a card, it means that you're going to take a card from the deck, and usually it's a specific style of card, and add it to your hand. The best example I have of this is when you look at just the regular cards in the game and you go to, for example, the Freljord. So they have a card called Entreat that is 2 mana spell that just says draw a champion. So this is going to be a tutor type of effect that will make sure that you draw a champion card, as opposed to just drawing any old card where you have the Avarosan Sentry that is a 2 mana minion, a 2 mana 2/1 that just says last breath. So when this unit dies, draw a card. That could be any card. It could be a spell. It could be a unit, as in a minion or a champion. But we want to potentially make sure we can draw our champions so that we have the best chance of finding our combos. The reason why I bring up combo decks is I am very confident that Zilean will play in a very combo style. Why do I have that confidence? Well, it's very simple. There's a special keyword and term that was added in the latest expansion called predict. Predict is a very interesting idea for a card game where you can potentially reshuffle the top of your deck, look at 3 cards that are there, and make sure that you choose which one you're going to draw next. This can be very powerful along with the time bombs because they give you the effect to draw one. So not only if we run a predict based deck will you be able to have exactly the cards that you're looking for, but you'll also be able to get to them in a timely manner. A little bit of a pun because Zilean's known as the master of time, or a chronomancer. So the whole idea behind Zilean is you want to try to get those bombs as fast as possible. You make sure those bombs are on the board and played. And when the bombs are played and you have other bombs on the board, they actually work with each other and advance themselves by 1. So when I mean advance, I say that these landmark units can have a countdown. It may start as high as 25 with the Sun Disk, a Shurima staple card involving Azir and Nasus and Renekton. But in this instance, these countdowns are only 1 turn, which means when you play this at the start of the next turn, they'll activate and they will deal 1 damage to all enemies and the Nexus. Why do I think this will be good against Azir and Irelia? Well, What Irelia wants to do for a game plan is she really wants to summon a bunch of these blades. Now, these blades that she summons are 1 mana, 1 attack, 1 health. The reason why I think that Zilean will be so good against Irelia and Azir is Azir wants to summon these Sand Soldiers, which are also 1 mana, 1 attack, 1 health units. And if I'm able to consistently have bombs prepared going into new turns, I will be able to keep their board at a minimum and stop them from being able to swarm and overwhelm me with units. The only issue that I can see is Irelia brings with it a unique keyword to Ionia called Blade Dance. Blade Dance gives them the ability to have free attacks, as you can read on the screen, that summon as many blades as are listed on the card. For example, Flawless Duet is Blade Dance 2. So the problem that Zilean might have is when there are free attacks that are being created, we want to make sure that we have ways to defend against them. And if there are 1 attack units, there's a keyword called Tough that exists in Legends of Runeterra. And Tough says that you take 1 less damage from all sources, be it spells, unit effects, anything. That 1 less damage can mean the difference between a unit dying and slowly getting chipped down and not taking any damage at all. So because of that, I really want to see if I can make a Lissandra deck work. Now, Lissandra is very interesting in that she summons these landmarks, Frozen Thralls. They have an 8-turn countdown, so they're a very long countdown. But when the countdown reaches 0, they summon a Frozen Thrall, which is an 8 mana 8/8 with Overwhelm, an extremely high value that can potentially make you win the game. The main reason why you want to go with Lissandra is if you end up summoning enough units that have 8 attack or more, you get to a point that you can summon the Watcher, which will cost 0 instead of 17. The maximum mana you can have in this game to play units is 10, so without that condition, you will not be able to play the Watcher. But all the Watcher does once you summon it is, as soon as it gets to attack, and you put it ready to attack, not even if you get the attack off, just if you set it up to attack and you press OK, you will destroy, completely remove from the game and destroy the enemy deck. Which means that the following turn, they just lose because they cannot draw into any cards. It's an extremely powerful effect, and I want to try to make use of this. And Lissandra is very interesting in that when she levels up, she creates the Watcher, but also, once she's leveled up, she gives my Nexus the Tough keyword, meaning that all of those 1 mana, 1/1 damage that are going to be going through by the blades to slowly whittle us down will not happen. So I would definitely want to make a deck with Lissandra. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go to decks and do a new deck. So the way that Legends of Runeterra works is very interesting. If you've ever heard of Magic the Gathering, MTG, another very famous collectible card game, there are regions, or colors as they're known in Magic the Gathering, that you can only play, or you're recommended to play certain colors together. The reason for that is because there are strengths and weaknesses to every color, and you want to make sure that you can match them as best as possible. So Freljord naturally is very focused on control. They give allies health, they provide Frostbite, which can be used to set a unit's power to 0, completely nullifying an opponent's attack. They have ways to give your allies health and reduce the attack of your enemies. They're very focused on trying to draw, trying to get yourself to the late game, and making sure that you can survive through different ticks of damage. The Freljord also has an interesting, different idea of how I want to build a deck that I may look to a little bit later in the stream, involving a landmark called the Scargrounds, which just says, when an ally survives damage, they get +1 attack and tough. Now, the difference between gain and grant in this game is a very important keyword difference that you'll notice on many different cards. The grant keyword is permanent. So this +1 attack and tough will last until that unit dies and continues through to the rest of the game. Similarly, a lot of the buffs in the Freljord are considered grants because they're all about having a late game power that is meant to stay on the board, overall power up your team, and make it so that you can beat the opponent when you overwhelm them with it. I'm trying to quickly find an idea of a give, and this troll chant is a give. So when you have a card, usually a spell, but could also be a minion, that says give an effect, that will only last until the end of the round. They will always clarify it by saying this round, but that is a temporary effect. So I'm very interested, even though it may not be the strongest, I'm very interested in trying a deck that involves Lissandra that tries to use Behold as a keyword. I know there are many keywords, and I apologize for newcomers to the stream and newcomers to Legends of Runeterra in general, but I have to try to explain them as best I can, and throughout the game, of course, I'll reiterate and we'll be able to see them. So the Behold keyword is if you have the requirement in play or in hand, you'll get its effect. So, for example, the Troll Scavenger says, when I'm summoned, if you behold a card that costs 8 or more, grant me +3 attack. So instead of a 2-mana 1/3, pretty weak stats, stats being the amount of attack, health, or the mana cost. It becomes a 4/3, which is extremely powerful. So I wanted to try to run some sort of a Behold deck. Now, the best way that I can do that, first and foremost, is jump to the regions and just type in Behold. And you'll notice that there are not many cards that actually use Behold. The symbol for regions is going to be in the top right-hand corner. If there are any that are unknown or confusing later, please let me know. I will reiterate them. But you'll notice that the vast majority of the Behold cards lie in Freljord, Targon, and Demacia. In fact, I believe that's the only 3 regions that have the Behold card. So the reason why I look to these in particular is because I want to play a deck that uses Behold. If I'm going to play a deck that uses Behold, I want to make sure that I have cards that have a higher cost in the late game, and then I have ways that I can get there. So the reason why I'm only creating certain amounts of cards is because I unfortunately don't have an unlimited supply of what's called dust in this game. So there are dust, and there's also wild cards that you can use to create cards that you do not have all copies of. So you'll see along the top here that there's an orange wild card, that's for champions. Purple is for epic rarity cards. Blue is for rare cards, and green is for common cards. And you'll find that symbol on the bottom middle of any card. Of course, it's more obvious to see champions because they have a stronger gold border around themselves, as well as the gold hexagon, which will denote the orange card. I made sure to save up 3 wild cards if I wanted to try to make another unit that could be powerful in these types of decks. So I don't know if I can get Lissandra plus Behold to work with a Zilean, but I'm going to start trying to look around and see if I can. So the first thing I want to do, knowing that Zilean's in Shurima, is that I want to click only Freljord and Shurima. The reason why I do only these 2 regions and not try to go for Freljord, Shurima, and Targon is because in a deck in Legends of Runeterra, you can only have 2 regions. 2 different regions at most for most of the game, including the ranked ladder and including many different types of expeditions and tournament play. The one exception to this is if you do a singleton deck when the mode appears, you can have 3 regions because you want to make sure that you have enough potential champions and enough potential cards and units among the regions. And depending on when you do an expedition, you could potentially have more options as a third region of what we call a splash into the others. When I say a splash, you're not going to have 20 cards from one region and 20 cards from the second region. That's just having two regions. What a splash would be is if I have 35 cards from Freljord and only 5 cards from, say, Shurima. Now, the reason why I bring that up is because the deck limit is only 40 cards. Thankfully, in Legends of Runeterra, you can actually put more cards in a deck than what you have as a total, and then you can just remove them afterwards. So my idea behind running a Lissandra deck is I wanted to make sure that it would survive the onslaught of Azir Irelia, and could potentially survive the onslaught of other aggressive decks while still furthering my own game plan. My game plan is to make sure I can level up Lissandra, make my Nexus tough, and I'll be able to create a Watcher that can destroy the enemy deck. In order to do that, first thing I'm going to want to do is make sure that I can survive. The very common cards that you run in the Freljord to make sure you can survive are cards like Three Sisters, which not only is only a 1 mana card, but it also can give you an option between 3 different cards. I'm sorry for the prismatic effect. I can turn it off if it bothers people. They've released prismatic as a way to have a glow or an effect on certain cards, and I don't have many of them unlocked at the moment, but they are pretty nice. One of the newest cards that Shurima got, which will definitely become a staple card, is Scrying Sands. When I say a staple card, I mean it is a powerful card that when you think of that region, you think of this as one of the forefront cards when you decide to build a deck. So when I'm looking at a card like Scrying Sands, I think, wow, for 1 mana, I get to predict, so I can choose the top card in my deck, and I can give an enemy -2 attack so that I can survive. To me, this seems like a very strong card, but I'm only going to make 2 of them for now because I want to make sure that I put 3 in of cards that I definitely need to draw to forward my game plan. Think champions where you don't normally want to run more than 2 champions. Alpha, you're very funny with the prismatic blinds. If it does bother you, please let me know. I can disable them. I believe there's an option. I believe there's an option in the settings that I can go to I can try to find it if it becomes an issue for everybody viewing, or for people viewing. The other cards that I was looking to, especially with the new expansion, that could be very powerful for a deck like Lissandra, is the Clockwork Curator. It's a 2 mana 2/2 minion that on play can advance an allied landmark 2 rounds, so decrease the counter by 2. That's very powerful with Lissandra's 8 turn countdown on the Frozen Thralls that she creates, because the faster you're able to get to the 0 turn and summon those Frozen Thralls, the faster you're able to close out the game. The other card that I wanted to look at as a very important and powerful tool with this would be, I believe it's a 5-cost Freljord unit. I'm not 100% sure because I haven't made a Lissandra deck. There it is. Darklorn Inquisitor. Extremely powerful for 5 cost. It may only have a 4/5 stat line, but on the round end, if the countdown of any of the Frozen Thralls is 4 or less, advance them directly to 0. And that will let them, at the start of round, summon the Frozen Thrall right away. So you'll have them at the start of your next turn to be able to attack, defend, whatever you need. So this card is extremely important in this Lissandra deck. I'm only going to make 2 for now, just because I don't really want to throw away all my wild cards if I find that I need them. But I want to make sure that I have the Darklorn Inquisitor in the deck, because it will really help the deck go. Um, Other cards. Sorry. As I was thinking out loud and talking through the deck design, I'm realizing more and more the Behold plan may not actually be the right way to go. The reason for that is because I don't believe the 8 cost cards to be powerful enough to save me or powerful enough to play them later. What I mean by that is I can filter by cards that cost 8 or more in the region. The only ones that cost 8 or more in the region are cards like It That Stares, obliterate all landmarks, or deal 2 to all other units that could potentially be useful. The Clock Hand, which I could find a use for, but I may not include as it's very slow for our game plan. And it would summon a random landmark or advance a landmark 4 rounds, which is very powerful. Lets us work together with our Dark Lord Inquisitor, but I don't know if it'll be powerful enough or if it will just be too slow to come out on turn 8, considering there are many other cards in the deck that can advance the countdown of our landmarks. Voices of the Old Ones is potentially valuable, but that's usually for decks that want to get towards 10 mana. The reason why I say it's potentially valuable and not too slow as compared to the Clock Hand is the Clock Hand is a minion, and mana in Legends of Runeterra, as I said before, works very differently. You have up to 10 total mana gems that you can use to play units, and you start the game off with 1, and it increases by 1 per round. A round is either when you or your enemy are able to attack on the turn. Now, of course, there are other ways to be able to attack, but there is an attack token that you will get every other turn. Is there a card that gives a mana gem early like Hearthstone Druid? There are a few. Thank you for asking, and I'm glad you related it back to Hearthstone. For general clarification, I have played Hearthstone in the past. I've played it since the beta. I'm taking a break from it now as I find Legends of Runeterra is much more free to play and much more engaging with the community when it comes to events and the reward structure on a weekly basis by compared to the potential of once a month for Hearthstone and spending excessive amounts of money. So the Freljord is known as the ramp class. When I say ramp, I mean providing mana earlier than usual to give yourself an advantage over the opponent. So Voices of the Old Ones is a ramp card that says gain 2 empty mana gems, and for the top 4 cards in your deck that draw each that costs 8 or more, then place the rest into your deck. Because we're really not looking to play cards that cost 8 or more, I don't particularly want to run Voices of the Old Ones, and I may run a Clock Hand or 2, but I do not believe that it's powerful enough to include Voices of the Old Ones with only the Clock Hand. So taking off the 8 mana restriction, I want to say mana. And the 2 stronger cards in Freljord that can provide you with extra mana gems are Wording Stones, a 3 mana 0/3 unit that says at round start, get an extra mana gem this round. And in particular, I'm very excited about Catalyst of Aeons. Catalyst of Aeons says get an empty mana gem and heal your Nexus 3 health. The Nexus is where you have your total health points so that you drop down to 0, you lose the game, you get the opponents down to 0, they lose the game. So the fact that you can use Catalyst of Aeons as a way to keep yourself safe and get an extra mana gem is a very powerful tool that will be able to keep us alive in the game and ensure that we can get off the cards that we need to in a timely fashion. So Cold Resistance is a new card, I believe, that was just added with this expansion. I may tab away from the game here just to double check which cards were added. So just taking a look at the list of cards that were not, or that were added I believe there was only one added this expansion for Freljord. Oh, there were two. Okay. So there's Succumb to the Cold, which I will definitely be looking to use. And there's also Buried in Ice, the 9-mana card that obliterates each enemy and summons a frozen tomb in its place. So it buys you an extra turn or two to be able to close out the game. So this card's been in since the start of the expansion, because you can see in the corner it's come from Empires of the Ascended, which is the overall expansion that brought in Azir and Shurima as a region. When I say that today there was a new patch and a new expansion, I mean that there was an addition to the game where they added 3 new champions, support cards for every different region, but mainly multiple support cards that can make those champions, the new champions, work. So the reason why I'm not thinking of running Cold Resistance here is because I'm going to have enough ways to get some mana, and I also want to have more proactive plays to keep myself alive than relying on granting allies stats. If I find that I can keep an ally unit alive, and I want to make sure that I can give my ally units more stats so that they can stay alive longer and provide more of a benefit, this could potentially be a very powerful inclusion. The other card I want to include, even though it does not give me a mana gem, is the Rite of Negation, because the most powerful tool that you can have in a game like Legends of Runeterra is the ability to prevent the opponent from dealing with your cards. Rite of Negation is a Shurima spell that is a staple, because it is a 4-mana spell that says kill an ally or destroy one of your mana gems to stop all enemy fast skills, slow spells, and skills. When I say fast spells, slow spells, skills, I'll explain what all that means right now. A slow spell, you can only cast it to start an action on your turn. When we get into the game, I'll show you more examples of that, but the basics you need to know are you can only use them when nothing else is happening on a turn. So when you are able to do literally anything, that is your time. Fast spells can be played at any time, but the opponent has the chance to respond. So that's where you'll find many of the useful spells in Legends of Runeterra are in the fast category. There are 2 more categories. The first category is burst speed. The burst speed is extremely valuable because not only is it instantaneous and can be cast at any time in response to a slow spell, in response to a fast spell, but the enemy cannot act on it before it finishes. So, for example, if I find myself that my unit is about to die, I can use 3 Sisters, pick myself a Flash Freeze, which will frostbite an enemy to set their power to 0. Once I've frostbitten that enemy, once I've chosen Flash Freeze, I use the 3 mana, apply it to the enemy minion, and the enemy does not have a chance to even stop this because it's a burst speed. The only way they could have stopped it is through preempting it with something like a Spell Shield. Spell Shield is an effect that will block the next spell that is cast on or affects that unit. So Wording Stones is definitely a potential. I will put them in for now. I'm just removing the cards that required or that worked around Behold, but I definitely want to make sure that I include those Wording Stones for now. The Plunder effect is a unique effect that only happens if you have damaged the enemy Nexus this round. So even if you don't have the attack token, there are cards and spells that deal damage that then turn on or activate Plunder. Plunder is usually restricted to Bilgewater, but can also be used by other regions or potentially has 1 or 2 cards that work in different regions. For example, Plunder works alongside the Wolf Rider, and there are 2 other cards in the Freljord offhand that will work with it. For now, though, I'm just looking to see what I can use to make Lissandra better. And the way that I want to make Lissandra better is through the powers of Shurima to be able to predict, to make sure that I can draw the cards that I want for my game plan as quickly as possible and be able to destroy the enemy nexus. I'm not sure if Zilean will be the answer. For now, as a stopgap, I did want to try seeing Talia. Talia is the other landmark-based Shurima champion. And what she wants to do as a game plan is just have you summon multiple landmarks. And on play, she will copy the landmark, a landmark that you have, including the countdown, including anything. When she levels up, she becomes a win condition in the fact that she, on attack, this is an attack skill that I was talking about on the Rite of Negation. The attack skill works the same way as a fast speed spell. It allows the enemy to react, but there are certain cards, specifically Nopify in the Ionia region, that will let you stop a spell that costs 3 or less, but it will not block skills. So Talia will do 2 damage, and if the damage is able to kill the blocker, she will deal 2 to the enemy nexus instead. If you have a landmark on the board, she does this 3 times. And this is the skill that gets put onto what's called the stack. The stack is a active tracker of all spell effects and skills that could be happening and shows what order they will occur. So Talia seems like a viable option. I'm not sure if Talia will be the best choice because I really do value the predict synergy. And I'm going to go ahead and make the Zileans here because I really want to play Zilean. In the worst case, I have enough dust shards, whatever you want to call it. I call it dust here. I'll have enough dust that I can create up to 2 more champions, as well as being able to create other rarities of cards using dust as needed. So I'm going to go ahead and make these Zileans, because I want to see about getting a Zilean deck to work. And I believe Zilean Lissandra can be strong and can be good enough to win games. So now that I'm using Zilean, I definitely want to make sure that I can have predict as cards in my deck. So working with landmarks and working with predict are very interesting synergies that we can do. Because we're going to have Lissandra and we're going to be summoning Frozen Thralls, I will go back later and add cards that will potentially help my units, such as the 5 mana. Instead of the Catalyst of Eons, I could run that new 5 mana Ice buff card. Because I want to make sure that I can have my units properly. To that end, the Aspiring Chronomancer is a weaker version of Zilean, but gives me more options to be able to play a unit on turn 2 and predict to set myself up to find what I need for turn 3 onwards. The predict package is very small currently, but again, it's mainly used as a supporting package to advance a game plan. The predict payoff cards, and when I say payoff, I mean the reason why you would run predict if you could not find another reason, or if predict is the main reason why you want to play a deck. Kahiri the Student is an extremely powerful common card that I will be making and using in my deck. If you've predicted this game at any point, he is a 3 mana, 4 attack, 4 health unit. That is what we call overstatted, in that he will have much more or much higher stats than what you would expect from a regular unit at that cost. And he'll be able to stay alive and affect the board in preventing me from taking damage or potentially start damaging the enemy. The other card that I'm only going to run a couple of, and by a couple, I believe I'm going to start with 2, is Kahiri the Returned. This will be a slower card, and it will be a card that I may not want to use for many different types of games, but if I'm versing another controlling deck, this card should let me close the game. So when I'm summoned, create an extra copy of me in your deck. What that means is he's going to infinitely summon himself. So only running 2 of them is good enough. As well, if you see him in a prediction, not necessarily if you choose him, but if you see him as one of the predicted cards, grant all allied copies of me +2/+2. Everywhere means in play, in hand, in deck, in discard, and even if created or summoned later, which means that as long as I have the Kahiris in my deck, and I see them as part of my predicts, he's going to get more and more powerful, and eventually when I naturally draw one, or when I choose one off of predict, I can play a Kahiri that could potentially be 10 attack, 10 health, 12 attack, 12 health, and will definitely help me in closing out a game. He also has the Fearsome tag, which as you can read, only enemies with 3 or more power can block him. And doing that will mean that he will potentially be able to kill a unit that is as valuable as he is in the deck. So I'm going to be running 2 Kahiris, because I think 2 will be enough, considering he will continue to create copies of himself when he is summoned. So I should not need to run 3, but I definitely want to run more than 1 for having a much higher chance finding him off of a predict. The other card they've added this expansion, which is extremely exciting to me and extremely powerful, is Time in a Bottle. Time in a Bottle is a 2-mana focus spell. Focus spells are like burst spells, but they cannot be cast in combat and they cannot be cast on top of another action. So they can be cast before you start combat, they can be cast at the start of your turn, and then you can still perform any action, but you have to make sure you do not cast them when you are dealing with a combat scenario or dealing with other spells of slow speed or fast speed. So I'm going to craft 3 Time in a Bottles, because even though they do not have, it does not have a unit attached to be able to help my board, it does advance my landmarks rounds, and my landmarks are what I'm going to be trying to do to level up Lissandra as quickly as possible, provide a powerful board state to keep me alive, and be able to eventually overcome the enemy. So I think this deck is already starting to look pretty good. Just the fact that I have advanced as a large part of my deck. You'll notice that I run Zilean, who can advance your different landmarks via the time bomb effect of drawing other cards, which will let you go through your deck to find what you need, as well as the new Clockwork Curator, which can just help you with your setup, Time in a Bottle, Dark Lord Inquisitor, and I could also run the Preservationist, because even though it only advances a single landmark, it has the potential to work just as well as the Dark Lord Inquisitor. So I believe that I will start by making 2 copies of the Preservationist to ensure that I still have enough creation cards and dust if I do want to edit the deck. Looking through, you'll notice that this deck is very heavily leaning towards Shurima. And the reason for that is because we are trying to go as heavy as possible on our predict synergy, and using predict in combination with landmarks and having Lissandra for our landmarks. There will be a couple other landmarks that I know off the top of my head that I want to add. Ancient Preparations is not one of them, because yes, it's 1 mana that will eventually give me a 2/2, but unfortunately, it has a 2-turn countdown, and I do not want to be using my reduction effects on Ancient Preparation. If I find I have nothing to play in the early game, then I may look to add them just so I have the ability to start working on reductions. As far as it goes for 1-cost units in these regions, what I want to try to do, ideally, is to run something like an Omen Hawk, just to have a unit to play on turn 1, and the fact that he will grant, or it will grant 2 allies in your deck, the next 2 allies that you draw, an additional attack and health, potentially making them much more survivable to any damage that could come their way. Imagine possibilities I'm not looking for, because I don't particularly want random landmarks with countdown, and filling up the card spaces in my deck when you can see I've already nearly maxed out the cards is not ideal. If I'm going to go for a more unit-focused board and a more unit-focused game plan, Shaped Stone is one of the staples of Shurima. Because if you've summoned any landmark this game, you can give any of your units, give any of your units +3 attack and +1 health at a unrespondable burst speed. That very quickly gives you the ability to destroy the enemy's minions, as well as being able to protect your own. So, with the fact that Shurima runs Shaped Stone, I may try the Ancient Preparations, considering it is a landmark I can play right away. Moving forward, Ancient Hourglass is a potential card that I can use to save my champions if I find that they are constantly being damaged, or I find that my Lissandra is unable to be defended. Because what it does is I can obliterate an ally for 2 mana and summon a sand statue. This sand statue, at the start of the next turn, will summon an exact copy of the unit that I've destroyed. So I can preserve and not lose, for example, my Zilean or a Lissandra or any ally. It could even be someone like the Dark Lord Inquisitor that could start next turn with summoning the Frozen Thralls. So this could potentially be a very valuable input. So for now, I'm going to include it. And I know you're going to say the deck's starting to get very cluttered. There are many more than 40 cards. It's going to be difficult to try to wean them down. I don't really think so, because once you have a better view of all the cards that you can work with in the deck, you can easily start to say, well, looking at this realistically, this is going to be too slow. I don't know if I'll be able to play this, so on and so forth. So as we move down the list of cards that we can have, I was very, very tempted to run the Preservarium. The Preservarium is a landmark that not only refreshes itself, and what I mean when I say it refreshes itself, draws you back a card to be able to offset the card you've lost in your hand, but also, when the countdown is complete, you draw a second card. Now, the reason why I think this is powerful and could be very useful in this deck is that we have cards that are all about advancing our landmarks. Specifically, we have cards that are very good at advancing our landmarks 2 rounds. We also have cards that work in a similar way with Predict. So not only will we be advancing these landmarks, we will also be drawing the card that we have selected, ensuring that we have a valuable play, or a play that we will want to have in the turn that we have or the upcoming one. So I believe Preservarium will be very valuable. I'm just not sure how much Shurima and how much Freljord I'm wanting to play right now. The other new card that was added as a 2-mana minion, which is potentially to me one of the most powerful minions or units in Legends of Runeterra, is Soothsayer. Soothsayer is a minion that says, when I'm summoned, grant allied champions and landmarks Spell Shield, which is one of the most powerful keywords in the game. Spell Shield allows you to stop a spell, spell or skill that would affect the unit, which means that it gives me a free way to not only protect my Lissandra, but to also protect my Preservarium, protect my Frozen Thralls, anything of the sort. And Alphagen, the reason why I wasn't too worried about looking for cards that give me mana is because when I have all of this ability to draw, and when I have all of this ability to protect my units, actually having extra mana does not make the most value, because you have the ability to draw into many low-cost cards and play those lower-cost cards, which will let you draw more cards in your deck, thereby making sure that you can find what you need. So Catalyst of Aeons, very interesting. I don't think it's the right fit for this deck. And same with Warding Stones. The other thing I haven't shown you yet is Zilean's level up effect. And let me tell you, it's pretty absurd. So Zilean makes 4 time bombs in your deck and predicts, if you've managed to destroy 2 time bombs, he levels up. His level up effect on round start creates a fleeting copy of each non-fleeting card I saw you play last round. Fleeting is a keyword that says this card discards from your hand when the round ends. The reason why it's so valuable to have a fleeting version of a non-fleeting card is because you can spend 1 turn destroying the opponent's board, keeping yourself safe, and getting yourself ready. And if they have a way to respond on the following turn, you get an additional copy of those fleeting cards. So I really don't think if Zilean was our level up condition, we would need quite as much draw. Or if we did have as much draw, we definitely do not want to have very high mana costs because we will be unable to play them. So I could see Soothsayer being really valuable. I want to leave it out for now just to see if we find that there are many people that are targeting our landmarks for destruction or targeting our champions specifically to be killed. We're not running a very high amount of spells compared to what some other spell decks can do, so I don't think the Starlit Seer is the most powerful card for the deck. As well, we have 15 2-cost cards that we will be trying to reduce. That is a very, very high number of 2-cost cards in a 40-card deck. Unfortunately, as I say that, I look to add Troll Chant as it is one of the strongest Freljord cards for any sort of deck that wants to go into the mid to late game. When I say mid to late game, or even when I say early game, the game breaks down into multiple different times. The early game is the first, usually 3 to 4 turns. So if you're playing an aggressive deck, you want to be able to play a minion on turn 1, that will deal damage, a minion on turn 2 that will deal damage, so on and so forth, and usually aim to kill an opponent by turn 4 or 5. A mid game would be anywhere from turn 4, maybe 5, through to turn 7. This is when you're going to see a lot of the more powerful cards in the game that will be able to close out a game and deal enough damage to kill somebody, or where you will see many different people run out of the ability to play the game because they have used all of their cards. When I say the late game, I usually mean turns 8, 9, 10. And if you have a deck that wants to go to the late game, you need to make sure you have ways to survive. So Troll Chant's very valuable, but once again, I'm going to leave it out just because I think starting with the most aggressive and frankly greedy deck that I can, involving the game plan of a Preservarium withdrawing and a plan of having the Lissandra landmarks being summoned and created, is more valuable to me. And there's another card further down that I'm remembering, I believe it's 3, maybe 4 mana, that I want to include as a spell for sure, more so than Troll Chant. So as we continue down the list here, the one card that strikes me as a way to deal with an aggressive game is Ice Shard, which deals 1 to everything. To your Nexus, their Nexus, all of your units, all of their units. And in the early game, it's not going to be amazing if we want to have a board state. But as the game goes on, this will ensure that we have a way to survive boards that have very low health but very high attack. The reason why I say it will ensure it is in the early stages of the game, we can actually afford to not play many units and not play many cards and preserve our mana. In Legends of Runeterra, it's very unique that you can have 3 spell mana. And what that means is any mana you don't use on your turn, gets put into spell mana in excess. So on a future turn, you can go above the limit of the mana you currently have, and you can then do additional spells that could potentially lead to a much more powerful turn than what you would normally have. One of the more famous Freljord openers is to do a turn 2 and you just let it go and do nothing. And then on turn 3 right away, you can play Catalyst of Eons, giving yourself a mana gem, bringing yourself forward, and healing your Nexus by 3 to try to offset the fact that you've given away turn 2. I'm concerned that since it's the first day of the new expansion, there are going to be too many aggressive decks, and Catalyst of Eons will be too slow. There's also a chance you may not draw it, and it may not do enough for you. Any cards up near 5 and 6 mana, I'm starting to feel are way too heavy. They have too high of a cost, they come out far too late. The only ones that I will look to are spells that could potentially have more value than what's being shown. Succumb to the Cold is a card that I definitely wanted to include in the deck, and I believe I'll be including 3 of them, because Succumb to the Cold, for ensuring I either keep my spell mana or ensure that I have mana plus 1 additional spell mana on a turn, I can stop an enemy's attack completely and begin to summon additional Frozen Thralls that I can then use to start lowering their countdowns with Time in a Bottle or with the Clockwork Curator. So I definitely want to include Succumb to the Cold. The other card that I thought would be a little bit cheeky, a little bit fun, and definitely the reason why I wanted to try Zilean plus Lissandra was Promising Future. I'm only going to run 2 of these cards, but on their own, they could potentially be powerful enough to win the game, and that is, grant an allied landmark, my countdown completion effect activates twice. What this is going to do is if Lissandra has 1 Frozen Thrall on the board, you can give it Promising Future, so you then get 2 Frozen Thralls summoned, which will immediately level up Lissandra. Once Lissandra is leveled, the enemy is on a very short clock that I will summon a 0 mana Watcher and obliterate their deck. As well, at the round start, every round that I have a Lissandra on the board, I will get a 0 cost Ice Shard to deal 1 to everything. My Lissandra is tough, she will not take damage. My Nexus is tough, it will not take damage, but the enemies will, further reducing their ability to play the game and win. So I'm going to be running 2 Promising Futures. My concern is that it's going to be too slow if I run 3 and has a much higher chance of making my hand unusable. But the fact that it's at only 4 mana gives me hope that I'll be able to close out the game very quickly by having a Promising Future in hand to play with the Lissandra. If I find that I'm not drawing it enough, I may look to add a 3rd, and because I want to make the game plan about advancing my landmarks, getting Lissandra leveled, and being able to close out the game. Looking at my units and my breakdown of units, Preservationist seems very powerful because it can advance landmarks. Kahiri seems very powerful because it is an alternate win condition if I cannot keep a Lissandra on the board to level. And if I find that I'm getting a lot of predictions with him and the units the opponents have just need to be blocked for longer periods of time. Succumb to the Cold will buy me time. Darklorn Inquisitor very quickly furthers my game plan because it cuts the amount of time that I need to summon the Frozen Thralls in half. And I can play this at the end of the turn after I've done a Promising Future, and if they do not have a way to destroy landmarks or destroy Darklorn Inquisitor, Lissandra will level, and I could potentially, if I play a Lissandra on turn 3, Promising Future on turn 4, and a Darklorn Inquisitor on turn 5, I could potentially close out the game as early as turn 6, which is an extremely aggressive stance for a deck like this. The reason why I say that I could is because it's a 40 card deck. You're not super likely to draw all 3 of those cards. unless you work very hard to get them, or you can predict them. Predict only shows you 3 options, but it does show you 3 options from your deck. And if you predict and you find what you need, it becomes extremely powerful. The other card that I wanted to make sure to add was the Blighted Ravine. I'll be adding 2 copies of it because when it's summoned, it heals your Nexus, and at the start of the next turn, it deals 2 to everything. Yes, it deals 2 to your Nexus and the opponent Nexus, but you've just healed your Nexus for 4. So it's actually a Nexus heal for 2, but a unstoppable, or nearly unstoppable, 2 damage dealt to all the opponent's minions. And your own. But our minions are going to be meant to be durable. So I definitely want to run Blighted Ravine. Avalanche is very similar to Blighted Ravine, but instead of it being a landmark, it's a slow spell, which is far too slow and not going to be useful enough compared to how we want to play the game. The other cards that I want to try to look for are cards that are able to play around having summoned landmarks or being able to use landmark synergy. So the reason why I might look to add something like the Psy Scout is because it has Predict, furthers our game plan. If we end up picking a landmark to play, it will permanently gain Elusive, and permanently gaining Elusive means that it can block elusive units. Elusive is a very interesting keyword in that if you don't have spells to stop them, or ways to block them, they can run you over very, very quickly. So I'll put Psy Scout in as a 2 of. Again, it has Predict. It'll further our game plan by finding things that we need. And I know our deck is looking very, very full, but basing it off of what we have, I may be able to take some things out. It may be very, very... It will be very possible to take some things out. I just have to think about which ones. Quicksand is personally one of my favorite Shurima cards. I wouldn't call it a staple. I wouldn't call it extremely powerful, but it's definitely useful. It will make sure that at burst speed, an enemy that is attacking, blocking, what have you, will lose 4 attack and will lose any of its keywords. The reason why I think this is so valuable is because you can then block an elusive unit, make it go most likely down to 0 attack. An opponent unit could have Fearsome. You wouldn't normally be able to block it. Suddenly, you can, and it will have much less attack. And also, it may have something called Quick Attack. Now, I'm not sure... Yeah, Sivir has Quick Attack, so I can show you. Quick Attack is a keyword that says, while attacking, it strikes before the blocker, which means that if they use a Quick Attack unit to attack you, you will not be able to damage that unit if you do not have more health than their attack, or if you do not have Barrier. Barrier prevents 1 instance of damage and lasts for that 1 round. Spell Shield prevents 1 spell or skill from affecting a unit, but it is until it's popped. It is permanent. It will last until it gets used. So, looking at the cards, I believe I found most, if not all, of the cards that I'd want to run. Quicksand, very valuable. I personally am of the opinion that 3 Sisters is not going to be needed because I already have a powerful Frostbite card in Succumb to the Cold. And also, I do not believe that I will need to run Entomb because I would much rather, over Entomb, I would much rather use 2 mana and do Ancient Hourglass. So I'm going to take out 3 Sisters. And you'll notice this deck is very, very heavy into Shurima because they have all of our Predict. They have our Predict payoff, they have our Predict cards. But once again, I have to reiterate, the reason why we're in Freljord is because Lissandra will actually be our win condition. Zilean poses as an alternate win condition that will use bombs to be able to allow you to draw more cards. But if we find that we are winning solely off of Lissandra, I may end up taking out Zilean. as crazy as it sounds, because he may clutter our deck with bombs that we may not even want. And we'll see. Since we're sitting at 46, I want to take a look at our chart based on mana costs. We're fine for 6 costs because we only have the one Kahiri, which would be a late game alternate win condition. We have the Preservationist and the Draklorn Inquisitors, which further our game plan. On 4 mana, we're a little bit high. I may drop Succumb to the Cold down to 2, but I believe Rite of Negation is extremely valuable. Promising Future, I could drop to 1, because realistically, if you have the Promising Future, you can win the game the next turn. But since it is a slow speed spell, it's possible that it can be stopped by cards like Rite of Negation or Deny, which is an Ionia 4-cost spell that will block or will stop a fast skill, slow skill, or a fast spell, slow spell, or skill. So I'll drop 1 Succumb to the Cold. I'll drop 1 Promising Future. As far as 3 costs go, I believe Kahiri will be very valuable for an early game unit, will be very powerful. I believe Lissandra is absolutely necessary with 3. I believe Psy Scouts will be valuable at 2, will protect us against the elusive decks that could be out. Because they did also add a card called Sumpworks Posse in Piltover and Zon that is very powerful and is elusive, so we may need a way to counter that. Time in a Bottle is going to be a very valuable card for us, but I may only drop it to 2 considering that we have so much Predict in our deck that we may not necessarily need it, and it is reliant upon us having a landmark on the board. Preservarium is very powerful. It has our draw 1, draw another. Looking at it realistically, Zilean's Bombs will draw us a card. We do have the ways to buy us time that we may not need to draw cards, considering that when we do draw them, we will draw exactly what we're looking for, ideally with Predict. So for now, I'm going to take out the Preservarium because I'm afraid of actually overdrawing if we're able to get Zilean online. Clockwork Curator as a 3-of makes complete sense, knowing that we want to make sure our landmarks get leveled. Or sorry, our landmarks get reduced. We want the Aspiring Chronomancer as additional Predict synergy. We have the Ancient Hourglass in to protect our Zilean or Lissandra. We have Shaped Stone to ensure that any units that we have on the board will be able to stay alive. I will probably drop that down to 2, just to make sure that we can get it, but we don't actually run... We run more than half units, but the amount of units we will actually have on the board will be minimal, because mostly we'll be running Lissandras, mostly we'll be running landmarks, and possibly we'll be running a Psy Scout, a Kahiri, or an Aspiring Chronomancer. But they'll mostly be used to block the damage from opponents until we can get our Lissandra leveled up. With that, Scrying Sands is just an insanely powerful card. Also, and it is a combat trick, is what they're called, when they can affect an ally or an enemy to increase health or decrease attack. And Ancient Preparation seems like a very powerful early game card. I might drop it down to 2 because I'm slightly concerned about drawing it in the mid to late game, but I feel that the amount of Predict that we have should make sure that we don't draw it unless we are looking for it. The fact that I've opened 1 slot back up in the deck makes me feel like I'll put Promising Futures back up to 2, just because it is so powerful at letting us win the game as early as turn 6. With that, I believe I'm ready to get started. I'm sorry it took an hour of theory crafting to be able to make 1 deck, but the games in Legends of Runeterra are only 5 to 10 minutes. I also like to think of fun names for my decks. If you guys can think of any more of a fun name than Tick Tick Boom as a way to start this, potentially Freeze the Clock, actually. Yep. Freeze the Clock. Perfect. The last thing I'll do is little nitpick to make sure that Lissandra is on the front of the deck, because this is where you can actually choose to put whatever card you want as the card at the start of the deck, or the card to represent the deck in your deck overview. Alright, with all that being said, let's see what we can do. Let's verse player. And considering the season just started, I think it'll be most fun to jump right into ranked. As far as it goes for my boards and guardians, I'm going to use the Ascended Oasis board because I'm a huge fan of the Shurima effects. I'm also going to use Cosmo because who doesn't love having a cute little puppy? But what I can do is I'm going to use Freljord as my card back. I like the idea of representing both of the regions that I'm able to play in the deck if I can. As far as emotes, this is really the most important part when it comes to deck building, because without good emotes, you're not going to be able to win your games. Emotes are mainly just used as the only way to communicate with an opponent. I am a very, very big fan of a few of these emotes. I think my favorite one is the Lulu Juicy emote, where she just drinks out of a blueberry. My other favorite is overusing the Shen's Good Game. I like to use the Vladimir Cheers, or the Katarina Sharp and Sweet, where she starts off with the dagger, spins around, and grabs a cupcake for the 1-year anniversary. Instead of the Darius, I'm going to do the Jackal Cackle, and this is where you can turn off Prismatics. So I'm going to give it a few seconds, see if I can get a response. Did we want Prismatics left on or off? Also, for future reference, I'm still not sure how I can start polls. Otherwise, I would have started a poll as I was finishing making the deck. So, I'm going to leave Prismatics on for this game. And I think we're good to get started. Let's see how we do. So as we look to go into a game, there will be many different decks out on the ladder, as it is a lower level, considering we just entered a new season. This person's playing a Swain Zilean deck. They're looking to deal chip damage, which is the level up condition for Swain of dealing 12 damage, non-combat damage, and making sure that they have Zilean as a way to deal that extra damage. So looking at my hand right now, I don't necessarily have something for the Clockwork Curator, but I want to keep it because it's a very powerful tool and could be extremely useful if I manage to draw into one of my lower cost units. Because my deck is extremely low cost, I decided to keep the Shaped Stone and the Clockwork Curator just to ensure that I can make value off of whatever I have. Thankfully, I'm starting with the attack token, which means that if I had a 1-cost attacker, which the only 1-cost card I have is Ancient Preparations, I would be able to play that attacker and start first, but this buys me some time against the opponent. So of course you Braum emote to say hello, and thanks to Predict, I know exactly what I'm drawing off the top. I'm perfectly fine passing this round because I have no use for my spell mana here, and I want to make sure I can save spell mana to potentially do Promising Futures and Clockwork Curators next turn. So what I want to do is I want to start off by summoning Lissandra. He may have a way to kill my Lissandra, but since I've summoned a landmark, I can potentially give her an additional health, which could make the difference. So the fact that I have this Shaped Stone makes me feel confident that I can start an attack here and still be okay. Yep, so that was fully expected. And this way I'm able to kill his unit and leave Lissandra alive with 1 health, which for now should be enough. It'll be interesting to see if the opponent has decided to include powerful cards that can deal additional damage, which they should. They're playing a mix of Noxus and Shurima. But I'm not sure if they have ways that they can deal damage that will be effective enough to kill this Lissandra. Even if Lissandra does die here, I'm not overly worried about it because I want to start getting out Watchers, and even without the leveled Lissandra, the Frozen Thralls, and even without a leveled up Lissandra to get out Watchers, I can make sure that I can still summon 2 8/8s with the Frozen Thralls, and that could potentially close the game. Moving forward, I don't think I'll be attacking with the Lissandra. That could have been a mistake. Fun. So here he plays a Zilean. He starts to try to put time bombs in his deck, and then try to look for the time bombs. And what I'm going to do here is Noxus has a way of destroying landmarks, as does Shurima. I'm not sure if he runs them. So to be safe, I'm just going to Clockwork Curator here and drop the cooldown or the countdown to 5 for this Frozen Thrall. This will allow me to preserve the maximum number of spell mana moving into the next turn, and will allow me to play the Darklorn Inquisitor, or the Draklorn Inquisitor. Now, the only reason why I wouldn't want to play the Draklorn Inquisitor and let him go first is because I would want to make sure that he doesn't have enough mana to kill it. When I say that he doesn't have enough mana to kill it, I really hope that he would not be able to destroy and deal 5 damage. But he's proven on previous turns that he can do that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to save the Draklorn until next turn, while being able to activate the Promising Future on my Frozen Thrall. So here he uses his Rite of Negation to destroy a mana gem and stop my fast spells, my slow spells, and my skills. I think this Promising Future is powerful enough to scare him that I'm going to use a Rite of Negation of my own. And since next turn would put me to 6 mana, I'm fine destroying a mana gem for it. Now, seeing that it's Rite of Negation and not just a deny, he won't be able to stop this on his own. Now, since I have both of these units, I will attack. He should block this, because once he does, one of my units will drop to 1 health and will die next turn to the Time Bomb. So he was able to deal 6 damage that's non-combat so far, thanks to Swain. And I'm in an interesting position because I can play the Draklorn Inquisitor and get 2 8/8s next turn. And the fact that he's used the Bakai Sand Spinner means that I'm no longer worried about him finding a way to kill my Draklorn Inquisitor with just 2 mana. So now that I play this Draklorn Inquisitor, he knows what's going to happen. If he doesn't have a way to kill my landmark, then next turn I'm going to get 2 8/8s, and those 8/8s are going to have Overwhelm, so they'll be able to deal damage beyond his units. So now this also means that whenever I can draw a Lissandra, she will be activated immediately and leveled up. So the 2 options of what I can do here are I can either attack immediately or I can play a unit. The idea here of an open attack or attacking immediately means that the opponent has to have a way to respond to my attack, or they lose the game. So you can see here, this puts them exactly at 0 if they decide to block Zilean here. If they block Zilean with the 4/5, they're still in danger of losing the game, but it would be next turn. And there you go. They surrendered. If I would have left the Lissandra on the board, which would have been the correct play over attacking with her on turn 3, then I would have had a leveled up Lissandra there, and the game would have been absolutely secured. But it looks like the deck's feeling pretty powerful, even without drawing the Zilean. Since he's not bothering our deck at the moment, and he'll have an additional predict, I am going to leave him in, but it's extremely possible that I may put in Talia over Zilean so that I can summon additional landmarks to be able to close out the game even faster, or with more power. Because if I'm able to get the Promising Future and then use Talia, I summon 4 8/8s. So this is the deck I was worried about when I was first making mine. And this deck is based on Azir and Irelia, 2 units that level up based on having units summoned and units attacked. So because I have the Blighted Ravine, I want to make sure to keep that, as it will be able to deal with an Irelia that hasn't leveled. And this hand's looking pretty good. Of course, it's not likely that I'm going to be able to get a 1-cost card, since the only one that I have is the 1-mana landmark. So I let it pass. But here I want to make sure that I don't fall too far behind. And what I want to do is I want to make sure to play Aspiring Chronomancer. This will let me predict and find a card that could potentially be useful later. Since my hand is looking pretty rough, I may end up taking the Aspiring Chronomancer. I don't really have much to play next turn, but realistically speaking, the Ray of Negation is the right thing to take, because as the game goes by, I want to make sure that I can bank some mana, and if I can bank some mana on turn 3, I'll be in a very good spot. This person shouldn't block here, because this 1/1 Sparring Student gets +1 attack and +1 health whenever an ally is summoned, and since he put down the Emperor's Dais, which summons Sand Soldier when allies attack, this unit's going to become very powerful very quickly. Unfortunately, I'm going to lose 1 mana here, and what I mean by that is I don't have anything to play, so even though I can do 4 mana worth of effect, which can stop a 3 mana spell depending on how powerful he has, or can stop any spell, but depending on what what spell he can play, it could be more powerful or not. So for now, I just kind of wait. I just say, yep, no problem. He's going to attack with all of these. He'll have a 3/3, a 1/1, and this 1/1 has elusive, so I won't be able to damage it. And then he will also have a 1/1 Sand Soldier, which is what I will aim to block. So these are the cards I was talking about with Blade Dance, noting that when they are played, they start a free attack, which is rapidly working on advancing Azir and Irelia. So here I block the Sand Soldier. The Sand Soldiers, if they attack the Nexus directly, they deal an additional damage. Now he should attack with everything. Unfortunately, I cannot do anything about that 6/6, so this is really going to hurt. So here my play is pretty clear. I will be playing the Bladed Ravine, but I think the first thing that I do is I attack because I know I'm not going to be playing a unit. That'll also potentially get him to respond by playing a unit of his own, which could open him up to taking even more damage. So I can't stop this, which is going to put me to 5 health, but thankfully Bladed Ravine will put me back up to 9. And considering its round start, this will be a 1/1, so it will die. Now, you can see the downside of having this Preservationist, which is, I may remove it as the game goes on, because this 5 mana unit is doing nothing for me, where instead I could have had another card to play sooner, like a lower cost unit. That's a Flawless Duet. It's going to start an attack. That's Irelia's level up animation. And unfortunately, I'm probably just dead here because I won't be able to block Irelia. And when Irelia attacks, she's going to get Blade Surge, which means that she can swap allies. So anywhere I try to block, I won't be able to block her. So unfortunately, that's just going to be a surrender. But that did teach me something very valuable in that Preservationist, even though yes, it does advance our game plan, we have so many cards that work on our landmarks and advance our game plan that it's not going to be nearly as powerful as I thought it would be, or nearly as valuable for the deck. So we'll take out the Preservationist and we'll look to see, all right, Draklorn Inquisitor felt good, but it really felt like you only need one. You draw it once and you're set. What we're looking for are lower cost cards to be able to play sooner, which is quite surprising because we have 12 2 costs. But the Ancient Preparation felt good when we had it, but drawing it later doesn't feel nearly as good. It just kind of sits in your hand. I still think running 3 is the correct play because it does give us something to play on turn 1. The other option that I can do is I can look for a low cost card, try to include in the deck that could prove quite useful. Destined Poro is too slow considering once we level up our champions, we just look to win the game in the following turn or two. Elixir of Iron would be a dead draw for most of our game plan, and we're looking for units, which brings us right to 2 mana. So I think the right play here is to put in a 3rd Aspiring Chronomancer and a 3rd Ancient Preparations, making sure we have a unit we can play on turn 1 that will become a 2/2 on turn 3. Let us get our landmark synergy going, and potentially we could actually activate it sooner if we draw it later with something like Time in a Bottle. As well, having another Aspiring Chronomancer gives us an option for more Predict to let us get what we need. And I think that's good for now. Let's jump back into it. So just before we load into game, I want to get a general idea from the chat. How are you guys feeling tonight? How are you liking the stream so far? What do you think of this Lissandra Zilean deck that we've created with Predict Synergy? Oh, thanks. I'm glad you like it. Also, I don't know if you meant it, but it's pretty funny that you said cool just because it works off Lissandra pretty well. So I opted to keep both of my champions here in my opening hand for 2 reasons. One was to see if there was value to Zilean in the deck. Because if I find that Zilean's not doing enough for me, I definitely want to switch him out for either another champion or another card. So, in this instance, I'm looking to play Kahiri on 3 as a way to try to block the 1/1 later. So I won't have played a landmark yet for Shaped Stone, but Succumb to the Cold is extremely powerful here because it both works as a way to stop his unit from attacking to save me a lot of health, as well as summoning Frozen Thralls that can then Draklorn Inquisitor. Can use Draklorn Inquisitor for more value. So I don't actually need to summon Kahiri off the top, or at the start of the turn, even though it would be quite powerful, because he's going to summon a unit first. So he's going to summon Irelia, and once he summons Irelia, he's definitely going to use a Flawless Duet. If he does use that Flawless Duet, it's going to attack with 2 units, make this into a 4/4, which means that Kahiri won't be able to kill it this turn, But what Kahiri can do is it will stop Irelia herself from attacking. And what I can do is I can give an enemy minus attack, which could prove quite useful in ensuring that I can kill the Irelia. So I block with the Zilean here to prevent 1 damage, while making sure I leave my Kahiri at 4 health, so that he doesn't die when Irelia goes in for it. If Irelia goes in for an attack of her own. So that's just a 4/4. Since he doesn't have any way to buff it and he decided to attack, what I'm gonna do is I'm actually gonna aim to kill it. So I already have a Lissandra in my hand. If I do draw another Lissandra, she becomes her spell, which is Entomb. That Entomb is less powerful than an Ancient Hourglass, and considering the state of the game, I actually think getting Ancient Hourglass may be stronger. Promising Future is a fun and cute combo, as you saw, but it only works against slower decks, or if we have an advantage on the board. So I do think the play is take the Ancient Hourglass. And the fact that I've set him to 2 attack means that I'm able to kill his unit while still saving this Frostbite, which will set a unit's attack to 0 for a later time. Moving into my turn, what I can do is I can aim to use Succumb to the Cold on Irelia with an attack, but they just got a card that says recall a unit and put a Flawless Duet into hand, or add a Flawless Duet. So I think the play here is either to play Lissandra or the Psy Scout, and I think Lissandra is the correct play to get started on the Frozen Thralls countdown. I love that the champions have interactions in this game. It makes it so fun between their own units that potentially work with them or across different units. So I think it's still right to attack with Kahiri here, because if I end up killing the Greenglade duo, it'll still be very powerful for me. And if he decides to block with Irelia, it will die. So I think it's just a free 4. It was just a free 4 damage. This is a very scary turn. And right here is the reason why I was looking to run an Ice Shard in my deck. And I still might. I might take out the Ancient Hourglass to put in Ice Shards, because Ice Shard alone, as a fast speed spell that deals 1 to everything, could be able to kill all 3 of these Greenglade duos, as well as any blades that they decide to summon. This turn is going to hurt very, very hard. So unfortunately, I wasn't able to get a landmark on this turn, which means that I'm going to probably die. Because what I was hoping was this 2/4 would get elusive, specifically to counter the Greenglade duo. I will play this out, but this person is about to attack for 4 damage, followed by 7, 7, and 6 that I can't stop in any way, so I will be dead this turn. Seeing how aggressive this deck is absolutely makes me think that Psy Scout is not the card that I would want, and I would much rather change it out for Ice Shards. So I have to block with all of this in the hopes that I have a chance to live. And what I can end up doing on his second attack is I can potentially save myself if I can use this. I can't use Ancient Hourglass on enemies, so there's no way. The fact that he's going to, if he can play any other unit, or he will get another unit from the Sand Soldier, will be 7 plus 7 is 14 already. Plus 6 puts me to exactly 20. So even if I was at maximum health, I couldn't stop what was about to happen without something like an Ice Shard. Yep. So that confirmed for me that I definitely need to run Ice Shard. I think, regardless of how powerful I feel about Predict, I think there are 2 many predict cards and not enough cards that can keep me alive to control the game. So with that being said, it's back to the lab. And the first thing we do is we take out the size scouts. And apologies for the fast scroll. I hope that didn't hurt the eyes too much. I want to add an ice shard. I'm going to start it at 2. No, I'm torn. I may actually just put the ancient preparations back down to 2 and actually put 3 ice shards. Because I've been finding that 1 damage would stop so much damage in the long run with only dealing 1 damage to my Nexus. So I'm going to run 3 of them. I also quickly checked to see if there's anything else that I could run that could make it a little easier for me. And I really don't think that there is. Because I look at it and I say, Ancient Hourglass hasn't been useful in any of these games. So at least for now, I could take it out. Which would give me a chance to draw more units and more valuable things. If I were to take out Ancient Hourglass, the question becomes, what would I put in? And when it comes to adding in different cards or different units, I want to make sure that they have an effect on the board, either the turn they're played, or that they can help my game plan more effectively. So, just based on my general curve of cards, it's looking pretty good. I may look to add a 3 or a 4 cost, maybe a 5, but as we saw before with the Preservationist, 5 was very heavy in regards to what we hope to do with our game. Oh. Well, it may not be an extremely powerful unit, but one of the options is we could go back to the Soothsayer. I just haven't noticed people. The only person that didn't even try to kill our landmark, they tried to stop our spell. So no one's been really targeting our units with much. I think what I may end up adding is the Kindly Tavern Keeper, because he'll act as a bit of a protection to heal my Nexus, which is always useful, or it could also heal an ally in a rough spot. And the fact that he fills out the 3 mana units helps a fair bit with making sure that the curve of cards mana that I have will be a little bit more stable. Also, I'm not sure if it's been enabled on the stream. I'm hoping that someone would be able to tell me. But I did try to add the Mobalytics tool to the stream so that you can hover over cards and see their effects while you're in game. I'm not sure if that's working, but if I could get some sort of a confirmation, that'd be great. I can also work to add it into a future stream if it isn't working currently. This person's playing a classic deck, or what I mean by classic is a deck from the previous expansion of Lissandra Trundle. They have a very similar game plan, but Trundle wants to behold the higher cost cards. So I need to take a bit more of an aggressive stance in this game unless I can get perfect cards to win. And what I mean by perfect cards to win is if I can get Lissandra plus the lowering plus a duplication plus the Draklorn. So what I want to do this turn instead of getting Lissandra started is to play Kahiri, because that will give me a bit more of an aggressive stance on the board, in that he'll lose just under a third of his health if he doesn't have any way to block it. So he plays a unit to block it, which is definitely understandable. And he'll draw an extra card from that unit dying, as the last breath effect is when a unit dies, this effect happens, and it's a draw 1. So now that he's low on mana, he has enough mana to play a spell, but I'm not sure exactly what spell he'd play. Okay, so he plays Vile Feast. If he has a second Vile Feast, it's a little bit unfortunate, but he wants to put it down to 1 because I think he has something like an Ice Shard, or maybe a way that he can deal 1 fast damage on this turn with something like a Withering Wail. Ice Shard is the card I have in hand. Withering Wail is a 5 mana card from Shadow Isles, which is the green color that he is playing in the deck. And what it does is it deals 1 damage to all enemy units and drains 1 health from them. So the reason why I'm okay with this, even though the Blighted Ravine does damage my Lissandra, is because I want to make sure that she doesn't die. So I do have my combo here of Clockwork Curator into Promising Future. I think I play the Curator first, just because if he doesn't play any unit in response, I can choose to attack with it for a little bit of damage being pushed through. Realistically speaking, I don't believe that Shadow Isles or the Freljord have a way to kill landmarks. So what I'm going to do here is I'm actually going to use Promising Future now, while I have the mana, and hope that there's no way for him to kill the landmark. The one card I need to look out for in Shadow Isles that I know Lissandra Trundle will run is a card called the Ruination. Now, Ruination is a 9 mana spell, so he could play it as of this turn if he saves all of his mana, that destroys all units on the board. So not landmarks, but champions and followers. So this person played Lissandra, which means they're going underneath the mana for Ruination, so I feel a lot safer. I don't need the Clockwork Curator to be played because I have the Draklorn Inquisitor in hand, and that leaves me with 2 mana, which is not enough to play anything else, but it's definitely the only play that I need to make this turn. It's unfortunate. It's unfortunate that he still has 6 mana, but thankfully they just raised the cost of a card called Atrocity, which deals damage equal to a unit's attack to 7. And they also have Vengeance at 7 mana, which would just say kill a unit. He realized he made a mistake the second that I played that Draklorn, because I was about to have 2 8/8s with Overwhelm. And as you can see, this is what I'm aiming for with playing this deck. Like, even though I've had a couple of rough games against the Irelia, I put in the Ice Shards to handle it, and even with drawing 2 Ice Shards, I still had enough ability to be able to do my game plan by turn 6. Well, I hope everybody's enjoying the stream so far. I'm not sure if anyone has gone to take a look at the cards that were released with the expansion, or gone to look at Legends of Runeterra in general, but if there was any other deck that you were wanting me to play, if you do play Legends of Runeterra yourself, please let me know. I'd be more than willing to try it. Hopefully I'd have the cards to be able to play it myself. Knowing that I'm versing another Azir Irelia, it's definitely too slow to keep a Promising Future. Keeping Lissandra is good because she has Tough so she can block some units, and Aspiring Chronomancer is a turn 2 play. The only reason why I'm debating getting rid of Aspiring Chronomancer here is because I have so many 2-cost units and spells. It's about a third of my deck. So the chances of me finding another one with getting rid of 2 cards is decently high. So unfortunately I hit Time in a Bottle, which in this matchup is not going to be very powerful. Thinking back, the other unit that I can put in if I find that I'm lacking a unit in the mid game to do something for me, there's a 4-cost Shurima unit that says destroy a landmark. If it's an allied landmark, then you can summon a 5/4 unit, which is very powerful. Thankfully, I'm able to get Zilean off the top of the deck, which means that I have a turn 2 play. And I also managed to find 2 time bombs in my predict. This person's going all in trying to summon these clockworks. I really like their play here, but I really feel like, especially for a deck that's based around summoning a bunch of units, I don't know if this is the best card. Mind you, who am I to judge? It's possible I may lose this game. We'll see. So this person's playing, was able to hit a 0 on 3, which is a little bit scary, but nothing that I'm going to worry about right now. Because I have Lissandra, I can block the Sand Soldier that's going to be made. So because I can stop the Sand Soldier with Zilean and only take 1 damage, I'm actually going to attack with the Lissandra into the Azir to try to threaten about killing that Azir. The way that I can threaten to kill it is a mix of Blighted Ravine to deal 2 to everything, and the Time Bomb that will deal 1 to everything. So I'm going to play the Time Bomb first because I want to be able to draw and see what I can get. So I got the Clockwork Curator. So what I can do if I really need to is I could actually just explode this now, but I don't need to. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to play the Clockwork Curator and advance my Frozen Thrall. So cute. And I think I'm not really worried about attacking. I'd rather have units ready for defense. So I'm going to end my turn here. Unfortunate that I just drew a Kahiri the Return without seeing him in any predicts. But if I'm able to see the second one, it will still be okay. Mind you, this isn't a game that I'm very worried about at the moment. I would love to play the Draklorn Inquisitor to get an 8/8 next turn, but I believe the stronger play will be a Blighted Ravine. The reason why I say it'll be a stronger play is because I can do Blighted Ravine, and if he doesn't attack immediately, which he should, I could play Time in a Bottle. The Draklorn doesn't do a lot because Blighted Ravine would deal 2 to everything. So I think the play here is just to... So I'd love to double this. I think I actually play the Draklorn, think about it realistically. It stops him from letting Azir attack. It ensures that I'll get an 8/8 next turn when I have the attack token. And in the immediate, I can use Ice Shard next turn to be able to kill any units that he'll have out. So what I'm going to end up doing here is... Ionia doesn't have a way to deal direct damage to units. So I'm going to block like this. I don't mind taking the 4 damage to my Nexus because it should become tough soon enough. And if I'm able to find another Time in a Bottle or a way to predict or a way to advance this landmark down below 4, I will win the game in the next turn or 2. So the immediate thing I'd want to do here is I want to use this Predict, because that will dictate the rest of my turn. So I'll use Predict on the allied landmark. Hitting another Succumb to the Cold next turn is pretty good because it means I could use it this turn. But it also, the Kindly Taverkeeper is probably the best option because I'll be taking some damage to my own Nexus, and all he wants to do is kill me as quickly as possible, where this will buy me more time. So what I'm going to do is I always attack with the 8/8. I don't believe I attack with anything else because I want this Draklorn Inquisitor to stay alive. And I leave myself enough mana to Frostbite something or to use Rite of Negation on whatever, if anything, they decide to play. So they play Dancing Droplet. I'm fine with that for now. They play Navori Conspirator, which is fine, because whenever Dancing Droplet's recalled, they draw a card. They're just trying to find a way to level up Azir as soon as possible. And I can definitely understand that, because Azir is going to want to level up, and once he's leveled up, he will start summoning a bunch of units with very much attack. The way that I want to play around this is he has many more things he wants to play on his turn. So I can wait, and if he decides not to play more things on his turn, then I'll be fine. So what I'm actually going to do here, now that he's committed the Sparring Student, I'm not going to get greedy and see if he plays a Dancing Droplet. I'm just going to play Blighted Ravine. What this is going to do is my Lissandra will become a 2-1, my Zilean will become a 1-1. I'll have a 4-1 Draklorn Inquisitor. But at the start of turn, I will kill the Navori, I will kill the Sparring Student, I will kill the Dancing Droplet, and leave him with a 2-1 Azir. Unfortunately, Ice Shard will kill many of my units, but realistically speaking, if I can kill his Azir and deny the attack from this 5-1, the 4-1, and the 4-1 that he'll be able to summon, I believe I'll just win the game the following turn with just having the Frost Guard to be able to use. So the first thing I want to do is I want to heal my Draklorn to make sure that it will survive the Ice Shard, because that will mean I'll have 2 of the Frozen Thralls on the next turn, which will level up Lissandra and can let me win the game. This also leaves me with enough mana to have a Rite of Negation ready. So he's committed to flawless lead and follow to try to get Azir off the field, and I want to make sure Azir dies. So I'm going to go in with the Ice Shard here and hope that he doesn't have a way to respond or another way to recall the Azir. Or he doesn't have Deny, which he probably does. Okay, so he has Nopify, which is a way to stop a fast or slow spell that costs 3 or less. Unfortunately, because I lost the Ice Shard there, I'll still get the Frozen Watcher on the next turn, or sorry, the Frozen Thrall on the next turn. But this Blade Dance is going to hurt very, very much. So there's 3 4-1s on the board. I'm kind of scared of them, so I block with this. At this point, my win condition is absolutely Lissandra, so I sacrifice the Zilean to preserve my health. So I'm about to die. So I have to block with everything here, or else I just lose the game. I believe I lose anyway. Yep, I believe I just lose anyway. So I give him the well played and wrap up the game. Unfortunately, he had the Nopify as a perfect way to answer my my Ice Shards there, which was to be expected, honestly. But the fact that he was able to have the flawless duet from the lead and follow that was still able to go meant that I couldn't do too much about it. I believe Riot just forced an update, which is okay. Take it. But yeah, very, very close game. I believe that I have time for one more, and I'm looking forward to playing it. So, let's see what we can do. I think that was a pretty good power assessment of the deck, and we were 1 card off from being able to win. So I think that the deck definitely has merit and can be played in the manner that I have done. Going into this matchup, Blighted Ravine does really nothing for me, same with Ice Shard. So I definitely look for a more aggressive hand to be able to get my Lissandra win condition online. As we saw in a previous game, Trundle Lissandra only really wants to get their 8 costs online. As I've been playing this game more and looking at this deck, or sorry, as I've been playing this deck more, I've been noticing that Kahiri is not necessarily the card that I was hoping to run, because even though he's very powerful with Predict synergy, the win condition is Lissandra. So I don't need the Kahiri as a late game insurance when I have so many ways to summon Frozen Thralls and consistently get them on the board, and have an ability with Zilean to play more cards later. So that'll open up a couple more slots in my deck that I could potentially use for even more defensive cards. And thankfully we're in Freljord, which has lots of ways to be defensive, including but not limited to Frostbite, Avalanche, and slightly more proactive compared to reactive cards. So he plays the Lissandra here, and I match it. And it's just a respectable countdown here. Unfortunately, I don't have a way to lower the cooldown on this yet, but I still think that Promising Futures could be a correct play. The other option is I could save it for next turn and play the Aspiring Chronomancer, leaving myself with 3 mana and the maximum mana that I can put for spell mana. I'm not sure what I would find on the Predict that would make it more valuable though, so I believe that Promising Future is the correct play. I don't believe Freljord and Shadow Isles have a way to stop this. I'm sure he has a card that he can use to kill one of my units, but I don't believe they have a way that can stop that play in particular. And if he passes the turn back to me, which he should, and he should definitely be playing a card, then I will end the turn and they'll burn 4 mana because they're already at full spell mana. So he plays the units, that's fine, but we're both just kind of waiting right now. Drawing the Rite of Negation here is very powerful, because that will ensure that I can stop anything that he plays. As far as spells go, I definitely play the Aspiring Chronomancer here, hoping to draw something that can reduce a landmark. So the Clockwork Curator will be good to use, but unfortunately it's going to be a little bit slow with the Draklorn. I was really hoping for the spell that lets you lower a landmark by 2 as well as Predict, but the Clockwork Curator is still kind of cute, and I think it'll be powerful. I don't know if it'll be powerful enough at the current board state, but I think Kahiri will be useless by comparison. So Trundle has an ability called Regeneration, or sorry, what are those called? A keyword called Regeneration that makes it so when he takes damage, at the end of the turn he ends up healing back to full health. I am not very afraid of taking this 4 damage as I do have healing, but I don't think there's a better use to use the Aspiring Chronomancer. And I just use my mana. I waste 1 extra mana, but I'm not overly worried. So unfortunately I drew both the Kahiris, which I forgot to remove, but I will definitely be removing after this. And it makes me feel like I have no good plays here, considering the Frozen Thralls at 5. Even if I play the Clockwork, I will still be 1 mana off from playing Draklorn as well. So I really don't have a good idea of a play here. If I had another predict card, I would play that. And if I would have gotten another predict card off of the prediction, I would have taken that. But I think for now, I put out the Draklorn Inquisitor. Start getting these other Frozen Thralls down, because I could always reduce the cooldown of this Frozen Thrall when I'm able. Not to forget, this Frozen Thrall at the countdown of 5 does have a promising future, so it will summon 2 8/8 Overwhelms. And I want to make sure that my board is not full, where the limit is 6 units. I want to make sure the board is not full, or else I will lose one of the 8/8s. That's the reason why I wouldn't want to play the Clockwork Curator. But it's my turn to attack. I'm not going to look to attack here because he has Trundle as a way to block. The Ice Pillar costs 8, so thankfully I'll have time. And this is pretty perfect because what I can do is I can advance the Frozen Thrall. I don't mind taking the 4 damage from Trundle here. I really don't. Realistically, what I should have done if I was thinking it through a little bit longer, I should have gotten Zilean killed. And I say that because that way I could have played the Clockwork Curator, but I think this is still the smarter play. And when I'm looking for next turn, I will probably end up doing the freeze. I don't actually think I play anything here. I know it burns a lot of mana, but next turn I get the attack token and I should be able to close out the game. If he plays Ruination because he's afraid and he has a chance of losing the game, then that's fine. I'm not actually worried about that Avalanche because I will still have enough health on Lissandra and the Draklorn that the next turn they'll both be able to use their abilities. What this does mean is that I could have played Clockwork Curator to be able to reduce this Frozen Thrall below the 4 countdown that's needed, and I would have been actually able to have 3 8/8s on the next turn. I believe the play here is just to wait. That's Lissandra's level up animation. It's pretty cool. The Nexus is now tough, which means I take 1 reduced damage from any damage spells or attacks. Unfortunately, I can't quite get the Watcher out yet, but what I can do is, since I don't really have units that I would want to attack with, I can do this attack to start, and I can also put out the 4/3 Draklorn. And the reason why I put out the 4/3 Draklorn is because I want a reason to use Succumb to the Cold. Freljord does not have many offensive buffs, they have a bunch of defensive buffs. And what I can do is I have the amount of mana that I can use Rite of Negation as well as Succumb to the Cold as needed. As you can see here, he's struggling, he's worried about potentially dying. I am okay to let both of these attacks go through, because I have the ability to stop any spells, like Ruination, that he could use to try to defeat my board. He was unsure what he's going to do. I absolutely let this attack go through. I don't think I need to use Succumb to the Cold at the moment. It leaves him on 4 mana, or sorry, 4 health, where I have a leveled up Lissandra, 16 health, well over 20 damage worth of stats on the board. So now he's got the Ice Pillar, and he's looking to get Lissandra leveled up. He may play another Trundle, which can give him another Ice Pillar to level Lissandra next turn. But I'm not too worried about it because I'm going to get another 8/8 on the next turn. So I think I just pass here. I don't actually think this changed anything, especially now that his next stuff using Ice Shard is not going to do anything to it. If I wanted to push any damage through, all it would do is damage my own units. Yep, so his hand's at capacity, so he burnt a card. And Fading Memories would have been an extremely powerful card for him because he could have done another Ice Pillar. So I'm very happy that I had a Frostbite there, because if this Watcher can't attack, it can't obliterate my deck. Which should buy me enough time to close out the game next turn. I don't... Oh no. Well, today I learned that even at 0 attack, even Frostbitten, it still obliterates my deck. But you know what I can do? Which is kind of hilarious? I can summon Kahiri. So now my deck's not empty, which means I don't lose at the start of next turn. Well, I guess there was a good reason to have Kahiri in the deck after all. Maybe he will stay. It gives me a very good way to beat a Lissandra counter. So I believe what I do here is, at the start of the turn, I just attack with literally everything, because he does not have blockers for all of it. And if he blocks everything except for Lissandra, what I can do is I can use Shaped Stone to give my Lissandra extra attack. And even still, these 8/8s, and well, damage 8/8s even, have Overwhelm. So extra damage over the amount of their health will be done to the Nexus. So I was able to get exactly 0 health to the opponent's Nexus if this attack goes through. Unfortunately, there's another Lissandra, which means I'm just going to Ray of Negation and completely stop it. Yep, because as soon as I play Rite of Negation, any card that is on the stack that belongs to the opponent gets stopped. And that's the reason why we run it. So, absolutely. We've learned how to cast death. Well, considering that Kahiri earned his place that game, I definitely think that he stays. We were able to unlock a reward, and it's a free champion. Let's see what we get. We've got ourselves our third LeBlanc. Maybe next time we play LoR, we might make a LeBlanc deck. That could be really fun. So it is 10:40, but I did notice that for the weekly vault, which unlocks as of tomorrow morning, I'm only missing 400 experience. I don't have any more quests, but I do get 200 experience for a win, or 100 experience for a loss. So I'm going to keep going for just a little bit longer. And besides, I'm having so much fun. I don't know about you guys, but I definitely think that last game was a real nail biter. Very down to the wire. Wow. So in this game, I have everything that I would really want as a starter. I have the Ancient Preparations on 1, which will give me a predict. I have the option to go for some Ice Shards, which I think I'll take, to give me a lot more control in the game. I've got the Zilean on 2, which can give me a win condition of bombs. Yep. I got the Zilean on 2, which can give me a win condition of bombs. And if I need to this turn, I could play an Ice Shard. So what I'm going to do, no matter how much I'd love to play a bomb, is I'm just going to wait. So now that he's under the mana that he could use to play another unit, I want to make sure that I can get out that time bomb. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to predict, but what I can do is I can predict now. And hope that I can find a time bomb. Wonderful. So that's Irelia. I'm not super worried about it right now, just because I want to start getting Zilean online. The way that I'll get Zilean online here is by playing the time bombs. This flawless duet, I can't really stop. I mean, I can, but it's not worth the Rite of Negation. So I let it go through, I get the attack going, and I cast an Ice Shard. And I cast an Ice Shard. This is why we made sure to pick up the second one, because he really does not like to see his game plan be slowed down this much. Especially considering that in order for Irelia to get her power spike, you want to deal as much damage as fast as possible. And that's the big reason why I wanted to make sure to keep some spell mana for later. Unfortunately, I don't have a way to stop this second flawless duet that he will probably play here, which will get Irelia leveled very quickly. So I'll be taking a little bit of damage, but what I want to make sure to do is I want to make sure to block some of this damage, but not all of it. The reason why is I'm sitting at a very high health total, and he's going to attack with this 2-1. When he attacks with this 2-1, I want to make sure that I block one of them. I'm tempted to block with Zilean, but I'm not overly concerned. I'm willing to lose my other units because Zilean will look to level up next round. So as the turn rolls over, the bomb will go off, the bomb will do damage. And Zilean will level up. And there we are, our Chronomancer. And now things start to get crazy, because I am going to be able to duplicate my cards. There's Lissandra. So I'm very happy about this Zilean, along with the Clockwork Curator, because next turn, I can get another Clockwork Curator. For free. Now I have a spare Lissandra. So if I do need to block with something, or block Lissandra with something, I can. That leveled up Irelia is going to be a problem in a second because I do not have another Ice Shard. But what I can do is I can actually obliterate the Irelia to stop him from being able to do a lot of extra work with his Blade Surges and end the game this turn. So he uses the lead and follow, which recalls Irelia back to hand, and should buy me enough time that I shouldn't lose this game this round. The reason why I keep opting to block these Emperors, the Sand Soldiers, is because if they were to hit the Nexus, they deal additional damage. So yes, these blades are hitting me for 1 damage at a time, but those would start hitting me for 2. I'm also going to make sure to play the Clockwork Curator. And it's funny because I've actually lost 0 cards for what I've played this game. I do think I use the Zilean now to block an extra damage because my health is starting to get a little bit lower. Oh, not what I meant to do. I do it like this because if I find a bomb, then I'll be able to kill his whole board. But I definitely need Zilean alive. So I found a Zilean, and his spell is very interesting. It's Chrono Shift. Give an allied champion, the next time I die this round, fully heal me and grant me +3/+3 instead. And that's very, very powerful. I just don't think that my deck is fast enough with my current hand to beat him. If I would have drawn another bomb, I would have been totally fine. But without it, I'm going to have issues. Yeah, so thanks to that recall, he's going to be able to play the Ribbon Dancer, which will give him a blade and 2 more Sand Soldiers. I think what I'm going to have to look for is I have to see in Shurima if there's a way to kill landmarks, and I know there is. Yeah, here comes the pain. No matter how much I don't want to, I'm actually going to have to use Succumb to the Cold on one of these 1/1s. Make sure that I don't take as much damage. And taking a look at the cards that I've played this turn, I don't care about another Promising Future. I don't care about another Succumb to the Cold. And I need to make sure I don't die. So I will block with this, and I can play another Zilean. The beauty of being able to play another Zilean is it actually puts 3 more bombs in my deck. And I get another Predict. Now, it's a little bit horrifying, the fact he was able to do all of that on a turn that I had the attack token. It really says a lot. The fact that he's going to be able to lead and follow, which makes another flawless duet that he can play again, shows just the amount of power that Azir Irelia has. There's no way I can stop this, so I just give a good game, and he casts death. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go take one last look at the deck before I continue out the games for the night. And I'm going to do something I talked about earlier, only briefly, but I wasn't sure of. I am going to drop Kahiri down to 1. Kahiri the Return down to 1. Reason for that, the second one sat in my hand at all times, and once I started to summon him, I constantly got another one on top of my deck to summon. So I didn't, or sorry, another one in the deck to summon, so I didn't actually need the additional one that I drew. With that, I want to make sure that I add, where are you, under unowned, at 4 cost, the Desert Naturalist. On play, she can destroy a landmark, and if it's allied, if I choose to destroy one of mine, I get a 3-mana 5/4 with adorable but playful art. So I want to make sure to add this Desert Naturalist as a way to counter that deck in particular that I just versed. I don't think the Kindly Tavern Keepers are doing enough for me here. And I'm seeing so many of these decks that value landmarks that I'm actually going to make and play 3 Desert Naturalists for now to see if I can have an effect on the game with them. The other option of a card I could put to 3 is the Draklorn Inquisitor because of just how hard he's able to win the game. As we go into the final games of the night, we have a mono Anivia deck, and what this is going to do is it's going to use Shadow Isle's ability to revive units that have died in the round to try to get 3 or 4 copies of Anivia on the board and deal constant damage to us and slowly chip us down. Thankfully, we'll have Lissandra. I don't believe that this region runs landmarks, and I don't have a hand that will support the Naturalist. So I look for a slightly lower curve, or more impactful units. So I'm thankful that I have an Aspiring Chronomancer for turn 2, in that when I play it here, I'm looking for something like Lissandra. I don't hit Lissandra, but I do hit Zilean, and he can be another win condition as I go. I don't block this attack because when this unit dies, it summons a 4 attack, 3 health, Escaped Abomination, and I'm only taking 1 damage at the moment. So I could play the Kahiri, or I could play the Zilean. If I played the Zilean, I'd be able to use Time in a Bottle, but I don't have a landmark for that. So I do think Kahiri is the right play here to be able to push more damage. It also sets me up better for any card that gets played by my opponent. Yep, so my opponent uses Glint's Beyond to kill a unit, draw 2 cards. And that means that there's a 4/3 Escaped Abomination there. Unfortunately, that means I can't attack with this 2/3 because the 4/3 would block it. And if I attack with my own 4/4, that 4/3 is going to do what's called a trade down to be able to kill my unit when it would have 1 less health than required. So I'm just going to wait and not worry about attacking him this turn. What I'm looking to do on this turn 4 is I'm looking to play Zilean and start trying to find some bombs. Hope for a bomb in the top 3 cards. I didn't hit it, but most importantly, I have multiple ways to lower the landmark cooldown. I have a Draklorn Inquisitor, and I hit Lissandra. So he's going to use Entreat to draw a champion. That champion will always be Anivia, because that is the one champion that he's running. I'm not looking to do anything here. And I get to keep 3 spell mana moving into next turn, which is one of the most powerful plays I can make, since I have a mix of Lissandra, the Clockwork Curator, and a way to summon, and a way to utilize the Frozen Thrall later with the Draklorn Inquisitor. That's a Bladed Ravine. That will deal damage to all of my units next turn. I'm not very worried about it, but I do think that the Clockwork Curator, even though it will die next turn, is the correct play, because I can attack with it now. So now that I have more units to attack and deal some damage, and the fact that 2/2 would die anyway, I definitely go in for an attack here. He still does the trade down, which is a correct play, because he doesn't want to take as much damage, because he's also a control-heavy late-game deck. The only issue that I could have here is if he has Black Spear, which they don't. Black Spear is a Shadow Isles card that deals 4 damage to a unit only if one of your units has died this game. So he plays Anivia, that's going to be pretty much his turn. And this is going to be very powerful because this gives me a chance to play the Draklorn Inquisitor, and I can use Time in a Bottle. So he decides to attack with Anivia because he wants it to die. Kahiri's going to die anyway, but this lets me block 2 damage on the Nexus. The reason why this works is because without Overwhelm, if a blocking unit dies on the opponent's attack, the attack doesn't actually go through. So at this point, Zilean's probably going to be dying soon, and I want to make sure I can get Lissandra as powerful as possible, so I may look for a Time in a Bottle. But my hand is looking kind of weak, and I can use the Desert Naturalist to summon a Grumpy Rock Bear off of this, so I may actually just go for the Time Bomb anyway. Actually, no, thinking about it out loud, Shaped Stone is the correct play, because I can give my Overwhelm unit additional attack to be able to push through any blocker that he has and win the game. So what I'm going to do here is I'm actually going to use the Desert Naturalist on my landmark, and that leaves me with enough mana for a Rite of Negation if he decides to use Ruination on his turn. Ruination is a very powerful and very commonly run 9 mana Shadow Isles spell that will destroy all the units on the board. So the Chronicler of Ruin is used there to be able to get an additional Anivia, but what I'm going to do, because I have to, is I'm going to attack with everything. The reason why I attack with everything is because if he blocks my Lissandra or my Zilean, he loses the game because of the damage that's going through on the other 4 units. If he has Harsh Winds, which is a burst speed spell to Frostbite 2 units, that will be very unfortunate. Yep, and it's Anivia's Harsh Winds, so that makes sense that he would have it. So what I can do is I can use Shaped Stone to make my Zilean stronger and kill this Anivia. And that's what I will do, because then I can use Ice Shard and kill both of the Anivia clones that he's created. And he's just going to be kind of sad, because he's on 0 mana. So he won't be able to stop it. And his plan of having multiple Anivia eggs that will come back next turn gets shattered. So unfortunately, because I did the Rock Bear play, I do not have a way to level up Lissandra at any point in the remainder of this game based on the amount of hand space and hand draw that I have. Yep, that's fine. I don't mind either of those attacks going through. I don't want him to draw the cards, especially not this turn. I'm not a big fan of that going through, but I was feeling like he wouldn't have much to be able to get as a 3-mana unit anyway. As the turn starts here, I just attack right off the bat because at most he has 2 units that can block. And that means he should be exactly dead. It's possible he has another way to harsh winds or freeze my units. And I'm not a fan of that Glimpse Beyond, so what I want to do is use the other Ice Shard here, so that even though he draws 1 card, he doesn't draw 3. That also sets his Nexus on 1 health. So if I'm able to get another Ice Shard off the top as I do run 3, then I'll be able to close out the game. If the opponent ends up with a way to win the game in the next turn, I would be extremely surprised. They could have a way to clear my board, but once again, I have the right of negation that I've made sure to save. So that's a Vile Feast. It only deals 1 damage. I'm not very worried about that. And here I play the Zilean, looking for a way to deal damage off the top. So the Time Bomb is the best option I have because I need to be able to draw more cards. So I take it. Yep. So he uses Vile Feast to try to get some more health back, buy himself a bit more time. So I don't worry about the 1 damage from the other spider, but I can use Lissandra's Tough, and if this Lissandra dies, I can create another one, or I can play another one rather. So that's what I was fully expecting and waiting for. So since he has the Ruination, and that's his last-ditch effort to win the game, I stop it with Right of Negation. Yep. Wow. These are some really strong control games, I have to be honest. And I have to say, the addition of the Ice Shards has proved invaluable against so many of these different matchups that we've had. So I'm very glad I was able to add those. The single Kahiri still feels fine, especially after that Lissandra mirror that we had. But final test for the night, because I believe I'll still get 100 points if I do lose, so this should be my last game. So seeing Kahiri in the opening hand is not a nice feeling, especially against Azir Shurima. Sorry, Azir Irelia. But the fact that I was able to find the Ice Shard off to predict, as well as having the Desert Naturalist to be able to destroy his landmarks as the game goes on, this will be interesting. It's the exact reason why I made sure to include a Desert Naturalist into this deck list. Okay. So he passed the turn, I pass back. And I use the Desert Naturalist to try and kill his landmark. Especially considering I don't have any in my own hand. He has the Coastal Defender, which is a new card. It's a more powerful version of the 1-mana 1/1 that we've seen. I'm not very worried about that card in particular, and I don't believe he'll have enough mana to do anything with it this turn. Drawing the third Desert Naturalist is a little bit sad here, but can't be helped. I don't mind if Zilean dies, because I have another one to play. I also have the Chrono Shift that I could use, but I would much rather have another Zilean for more bombs in deck, because he's looking like he'll be my win condition here. It'll also allow me another Predict, which is very powerful. So I believe he should attack here with the 6/6. Oh, he's going to try to go all in. Alright, so now it's an 8/6. And that's fine. He should attack with both. And thankfully Zilean's had 0 time bombs so far, so I have no problem sacrificing him right now. Unfortunately, this unit's elusive, which means I can only block it with an elusive unit myself. But now I have 6 time bombs in deck. I am so surprised that I don't see a single time bomb there. Having approximately... Well, that's not that improbable. Unfortunately, I have 0 ways that I can summon landmarks here. So, any of these are not very good. The Time in a Bottle is the best option because it does come with Predict. And once again, Desert Naturalist felt great the turn I played it. Now, doesn't feel so great. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to try to disrupt what he has in using Ice Shard on the Daring Droplet. And I was actually thinking to use a second Ice Shard anyway, because I did want to kill this Navori Conspirator at one point or another. So being able to kill both the Droplet, which will enable his turns, as well as the Navori Conspirator, feels pretty strong. Now I know what my draw is going to be, and it's not going to be great. So what I do is I just play this Kahiri. And what ends up happening is I can play the Kahiri, it puts more cards back in my deck, and as it stands right now, I can afford to attack with Kahiri. The only thing you can use to block it is the 4/3, and I'm very happy to have that killed. I forgot about the staple card that I put in the deck at the start of the game. So that's absolutely my fault. Fortunately, that is a one health Coastal Defender. So if I do manage to draw a Time Bomb, I can use Time in a Bottle to immediately reduce its turn cooldown. So the fact that the Azir is already leveled is pretty disconcerting. But I want to use the Predict to try to pick up the pace a little bit on the game plan here. The Draklorn Inquisitor will be too slow at this point, and so will the Clockwork Curator. I need the Aspiring Chronomancer, but unfortunately, I'm not getting any of my draw cards. So it's looking like all 3 Desert Naturalists was probably too much. And I think 2 was good enough. So at this point, he hasn't even used his attack token, and he will level up Irelia on this attack. And this guy is 16, which I will block, but I definitely lose on his next attack. So I can technically live if I use Zilean to block, which I can. But I don't see how I win this. Unfortunately. Because from this position, it's fully possible that he'll have another way to... Yep. So because he swapped those allies, there's nothing I can do about it. And he gets 18 damage directly. Good game. If Azir levels without the Sun Disc, can it not get the -10 on the counter? So it can... Or sorry, it will not get the -10 on the counter for free. But what ends up happening is that you don't run the Sun Disc unless you're usually running just a mono Shurima deck. What I mean by that is that you only put cards with Shurima in your deck. Because if you do run any others that aren't just Shurima, like a mono Shurima, you're gonna have a lot of issues when it comes down to being able to draw the Sun Disc. Because if you don't have all the cards in your deck being Shurima, you don't get the Sun Disc guaranteed in your opening hand. But good question. Mm-hmm. So, I believe we take the Scrying Sands here because it'll give us a much better chance of finding a more useful card on the next turn, while also being able to keep us alive as the game goes on. Yep, so this Scrying Sands will let our Zilean live, and we play the Kahiri the Student here because he'll be a 4/4. So I believe what I do here is I want to block, but I'm worried that he's going to give his unit some sort of a barrier, or what he'll do is he will use single combat, which would be really bad against my current hand and board state. Oh man. So I play the Bladed Ravine here for the health, even though it's only temporary, and it will make sure to kill the Battlesmith on the next turn. So Garen will be able to go down to 4 health on the next turn because this is a round start effect. And I think I just end my turn here. His regeneration happens on round end, and the Bladed Ravine would happen on round start with the countdown being completed. As I say, I always prefer to play the Zileans, but I think I need the board control at this point. I do like how they added the effect for the Zilean Chrono Shift. Yeah, I definitely think that I need to drop the Desert Naturalist to 2 at most. I have another proactive card to play. Because right now, I have not much that I can do here. Yep. So because I want to preserve max spell mana for next turn to be able to Chrono Shift Zilean again if he goes to challenge it. Interesting, this is a new card for this set. Yeah. So unfortunately I won't have Zilean's Chrono Shift next round, but I will still have a Zilean off the top of the deck. Which is a good and a bad thing, because unfortunately he doesn't draw me any cards, so I will have overall negative value. You know, with playing through this deck so much in such a short time span, I genuinely believe that Zilean may not be the champion for the deck. I'm not sure I'm sold on Talia, but yeah, beautiful. Not sure I'm sold on Talia, but definitely don't think Zilean is the champion that I would put with Lissandra for this. It might just be a mono Lissandra deck. It might not even need another champion. But I think that's going to be an idea for another day. So I want to say thank you all for watching. Sorry I ended up taking a break in the middle. But I hope you all enjoyed. Please let me know and give me some feedback. And have a great night.